On the 3rd of August, tens of thousands of Australians marched across the Sydney Harbour Bridge under the banner March for Humanity, Save Gaza. Among them were former Foreign Minister Bob Carr, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, Sydney's Lord Mayor Clover and federal MP Ed Husic. Behind the politicians and celebrities stood a tall, bearded man at the very front of the procession, holding aloft a portrait of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Carr later claimed he hadn't noticed the picture, yet he posted photos of himself standing directly in front of it to his social media accounts. The symbolism was grotesque. At the centre of Australia's largest pro-Palestinian demonstration in history stood the figurehead of the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. The optics did not end there. Not only was the portrait of Khamenei held up at the March for Humanity, but so was the black ISIS flag, flown by Youssef Ouenat, a convicted Islamic State recruiter released from prison only last year. Such symbolism has become even more disturbing in light of revelations made this week. On the 26th of August, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, along with Mike Burgess, the Director General of the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO, confirmed that the Islamic Republic of Iran directed the arson attack against the Adas Israel Synagogue in Melbourne and the Lewis Continental Kitchen, a Jewish-owned business in Sydney. Australia has expelled Iran's ambassador, the first such expulsion since the Second World War, suspended operations in its Tehran embassy, and said it would legislate to list the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, as a terrorist organisation. Investigators say that the IRGC used a web of proxies, including organised crime intermediaries, and traced funding flows, including cryptocurrency transactions, to local operatives. More incidents are suspected. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran has been using proxies to sow discord abroad while crushing dissent at home. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen are sustained by Iranian money, weapons, and intelligence. As Pierre James and Suha Hassan wrote for Quillette in 2024, the Islamic Republic provides Hamas with training, weapons, and nearly $100 million in annual funding. Furthermore, not only did the highest levels of the Iranian government give the go-ahead for the October 7 attack in Israel, but Iran also provided special training in the months leading up to the attack, such as in the use of paragliders, as well as additional weapons and funding specifically earmarked for the commission of the atrocity. These Iranian proxy groups are formally designated as terrorist organizations by much of the democratic world, while Iran describes them as liberation movements. In practice, they serve Tehran's goals. They destabilize neighbors, attack Western targets, and keep the dream of Israel's annihilation alive. Hezbollah's bombing in Argentina, Hamas's massacres of Israeli civilians, and the Houthis' missile attacks in the Red Sea all lead back to Iran. The US State Department estimates that Tehran spent more than $16 billion between 2012 and 2020 sustaining Assad and his militia allies in Syria. Hezbollah alone received upwards of $700 million in that period. Iran's reach has extended into Europe, Asia, and now, as we have learned, into Australia. And yet, Western activists continue to romanticize the Palestinian cause in the simplest of binaries. It's the oppressed against the oppressor. It's the colonized versus the colonizer. In this telling, the history of the conflict is airbrushed away, Hamas disappears from view, and Iran's authoritarian theocracy, an Islamist regime that executes dissidents and flogs women for showing their hair, is conveniently ignored. The binary may provide ideological comfort to radical leftists, but it flattens reality and corrodes moral judgment. This callousness was laid bare by gender theorist Judith Butler in the aftermath of the 7th of October massacres, when she insisted that the uprising was an act of armed resistance and was not a terrorist attack and was not even an anti-Semitic attack.
It is not a terrorist attack, and it's not an anti-Semitic attack. It comes from a state of subjugation and against a violent state apparatus.
In her recent conversation with Quillette, the Iranian poet Roya Hakakian traces the modern-day alliance between the Western left and Islamists to the Iranian Revolution, which she lived through as a young woman in Tehran. In many ways, she told Quillette, the Ayatollah was a pioneer. This was the first time an Islamic fundamentalist had taken over any secular revolutionary movement. To the leftist intellectual elites of the time, he appeared to be a figurehead of resistance to tyranny in the vein of someone like Mahatma Gandhi. His religious conviction was viewed as a purely personal spiritual commitment, and his religious garb was merely viewed as a kind of local costume. No one anticipated that he would ride the wave of revolutionary fervor to seize power for himself, setting a precedent that would inspire the terrorists of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and Hamas, and transform the words Allahu Akbar from a religious chant into a political war cry. The Iranian Revolution showed how susceptible leftist causes are to being hijacked by Islamists. It should have been a wake-up call for governments, but sadly the world is still learning those painful lessons. It's not only academics and fringe activists who are naive about the ambitions and machinations of Islamist Iran. In Australia, elected officials including Ed Husic, Marine Faruqi, Clover Moore and Jenny Leong marched across the Harbour Bridge alongside ISIS recruiters and protesters brandishing portraits of the Ayatollah. Former Australian Foreign Minister Bob Carr rails against the supposed power of the Israel lobby, spinning its conspiratorial webs even as Tehran's terror networks orchestrate firebombings in our suburbs. When Australians march beneath portraits of Khamenei or wave the black flag of ISIS, they are not advancing the cause of humanity. They are, knowingly or not, lending legitimacy to forces that burn synagogues, murder civilians, and dream of global jihad. What begins as a fashionable protest can quickly become a stage for extremists, be they Tehran's operatives or local recruiters exploiting the Gaza war to radicalize the disaffected. Iran's regime is not a distant problem. Its fingerprints are already on arson attacks in Melbourne and Sydney. To parade under its symbols while ignoring its victims is not moral clarity but dangerous naivety. What is needed now is moral seriousness and the courage to confront the extremists in our streets as firmly as we condemn those abroad. We should also be asking why it took so long for the Australian government to list the IRGC as a terrorist organisation.